Well, it's a beautiful day in Columbus, Ohio. It's nice to see a live audience here with us at COSI, the Center for Science and Industry. It's great to have you folks watching on the internet. Welcome back to the Food Dialogues. My name's Joel Riley. I host the morning show at 610 WTVN Radio here in Columbus. And today we are streaming live from the Center of Science and Industry in beautiful downtown Columbus, Ohio. We're excited that you could be a part of today's discussion. And, well, the first hour I thought went pretty well. We got a little bit of heat. Had a little head-butting here and there, but great information, and that's really what we're hoping to get to you today. Those of you that are here in person, and those of you that, again, are joining us on the internet, we want to say thanks. Thanks for being here and participating. We'd like to encourage all of you who are here and online to send us in your questions, and I'm going to do my best to weave them through the course of the next hour's discussion. If you're joining us online, you can also join the conversation. You can do that via Twitter. You can follow at USFRA. You can follow at Ohio Farm Bureau, or you can use the #FoodD, F-O-O-D, big D at the end, so 2 O's, 2 D's, and that hashtag will work perfect for you. You can also post questions on your Facebook to the Ohio Soybean Farmers or Ohio Farm Bureau Federation Facebook pages, all right? So I know it's a lot of information. Use the one that works for you, and we'll get you a part of the fabric of the conversation. Now, for those of you who are here at COSI this afternoon, you should have a card on your seat or near your person. What we'd ask you to do is write your question, pass it down to stage right or your left side, and we have runners working. They will key it in, and I have this handy-dandy little iPod. It magically appears in front of me, and I will ask the questions as best I can. So we just last hour wrapped up a conversation about biotechnology or GMOs in your food discussion, and we want to remind you that all the discussions are going to be available, and you'll be able to see the whole 60-minute version, and they'll be up live later on online today. All of today's panel discussions were organized by the Ohio Soybean Council, and we had a few meetings, and they did a bang-up job. Also, the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation and the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance. This is part of the Food Dialogues, which aim to answer questions about how food is grown, also how it's raised, which brings us to our next topic. And for the next hour, we're going to dive into sustainability. It's sustainability and your food. These panel discussions, they've been taking place in several cities around the United States, and it's great to have this one here today from Columbus. This panel is going to cover topics relating to the sustainability of our food production system and the effects it has on our environment, our health, and our food supply. Our panel, it includes, and we're going to start over here, Pat Hord. Pat is an Ohio hog, cattle, and grain farmer. Also, Ben Sippel, who has sheep, a sheep dairy, and is also a vegetable farmer, 77 acres, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Joe Logan, who's director of ag programs at the Ohio Environmental Council. And they say it for the university, we might as well give it to you too. Dr. Marty Matlock, who's a professor, biological and agricultural engineering at the University of Arkansas. Welcome. Lisa Hamler-Fugitt, Executive Director at the Ohio Association of Foodbanks, and Stephanie Eakins, who is a food blogger, and Stephanie and I were talking just moments ago, all about the recipes, so if you want to cook from scratch, and it's guys too, come on, food's good when you cook it from scratch, her blog is absolutely the place to see some great recipes. So during the next hour, we're going to have a lot of ground to cover. As in the previous panel, we'll be taking questions from both you who are with us here in Columbus and those who are joining us via the internet. So again, if something occurs to you, feel free to type it out, put pen to paper or index card as it were, and come right to us. So we've got the questions, and I've already got some lined up here. So I'd like to just start, and Pat, I'll start with you, and we'll just kind of go around. Sustainability is kind of a big topic, so let's just get everybody's perspective. Pat, tell me, what does sustainability mean to you?
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Our mission statement for our farm, or our vision statement, is feeding families through sustainable food production. So we think that there's multiple layers to sustainability. Ultimately, it's about transparency. So people have to know and understand our food system, and so we work pretty hard at them understanding what we do and how we do it. It's also being good with the animals, animal care. We have those types of things we think are sustainable because we think that good animal care means that the animals will do better if we take good care of them. So that's sustainable. Environmentally, we think that's, you know, a lot of times people think of sustainability as an environmental thing, and we think that's correct as well, because we think we're, you know, in farming, we're the ultimate recyclers. I mean, we take the manure, the nutrients, we put it on the farm, we grow the corn grows up so that we provide nutrients for the corn, and then it's harvested, taken back to our feed mill, ground into pig feed, taken back to the farm, fed to the pigs, and the cycle goes on. So it's kind of and so we can talk a lot about the, you know, how we do that and how we employ technology and that type of thing, but that's an important part of sustainability, as well as having an efficient delivery model, as far as efficiently delivering protein, whether it be beef or pork or corn or soybeans. We think that will long-term be sustainable for us. So that's how we view sustainability.
Very good. Ben?
As another farmer, I'd like to add that on our farm, we look at sustainability in many of the same aspects of animal care, taking care of our soil, our water. But we also like to look at the next generation of farms. I'm sure everyone in the audience is aware farmers are getting older every day, especially farmers that do it for a living. And so we like to look at producing a farm system and a food system for the next generation also. And I like to say that we need to create farms in this country where we're happy for our children to take them over and want them to take them over.
Very good. Joe?
Yeah, I think there's an intuitive aspect to the idea of sustainability. We know that it means a balance between inputs and outputs, so we would look for farms or operations that are not reliant on a heavy stream of energy from off the farm, whether it be fossil fuel or otherwise. We want to look at a farm that, as Pat mentioned, is not reliant upon nutrient sources from off the farm, or that is not a source of nutrients sources flowing off the farm, and certainly some things about like capital. If you want to have a sustainable system, you can't have a system that relies upon heavy inputs of capital, whether those be farm bill payments or any other sources of capital. You want to think about some socio-cultural things. Obviously, if you want to have a farm that is predicated on the sort of a stable, available source of the labor inputs that are required, rather than having to rely on other communities, other areas of the world to fulfill that resource, and also reliance upon infrastructure things. There has to be a balance there between the resources that are consumed and the resources that are produced.
Very good. Dr. Marty?
Marty, please. I like the definition that Field to Market, the Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture, developed. It's an organization, a coalition of 60 or 70 farmer and farm supply chain organizations. So it's really a farmer-based definition. It's meeting the needs of the current generations while enhancing future generations' ability to meet their needs. It's a very optimistic version of what sustainability is. We're here to make the land better and to leave the wood stack a little taller.
Good stuff. Now, from a food bank perspective, what does sustainability mean to you?
Well, certainly connecting people to where their food comes from. We need a strong agriculture community, both locally, state, and domestically. We need to be able to produce foods that are accessible, that more importantly are affordable for all as we continue to struggle. And I think as we talk about ensuring that we have viable agriculture in our state, and that we, again, are connecting, especially young people who don't understand where their food comes from. I mean, we look at within 2 generations, our young people have become completely disconnected with our food. But more importantly, food is health, food is medicine.
Good stuff.
You know, for me, sustainable food is ensuring, you know, that we're able to continue to produce food and obtain it, you know, in a way that's safe for the environment, that's safe for humans, and in a way that treats animals well. So as a consumer, I think it's just really being informed about, you know, where you're getting your food from.
Yeah, when you think about that as at its root, it's keeping it going. Mm-hmm. But that's the thing that's fascinating about the people up here is what does keep it going mean? When you think about sustainability, I guess too, I might put it to you all or just jump in, but what makes it unsustainable? I mean, what do you think is the or a couple of the biggest roadblocks to sustainability today?
You start your laundry list. We know that energy is a huge issue. We've heard for generations now about peak oil. People are starting to talk about peak soil. We are actually exporting a great deal of our soil organic matter. We've lost probably 50% of our topsoil in the last 150 years of fairly intensive agriculture. That's a concern for the future. People are talking about peak phosphorus. That is a limitation that people need to be concerned about too. So there are a lot of limits, a lot of walls, and of course we know that we're losing a lot of nutrients off of farms, and that's becoming a water quality issue. So
do you find that regulation, governmental intervention is a problem too, or is it more just, hey, we got to have dirt to grow stuff and we're losing our dirt?
Yeah, it's sort of fascinating. Agriculture has been one of the areas that has been not approached from a directly and immediately regulatory aspect with regard to environmental aspects. Now, we may be heading in that direction, and I know that Ohio has taken some incremental steps toward that regulatory approach in terms of water quality issues, but that's pretty rare in agriculture.
Okay, I'm curious too. Oh, go ahead.
I'd just like to add, we take that big pile of laundry, the laundry list, and we put it into two baskets. One is impacts, those are the bad things that happen. The other are efficiencies, the good things that we do. And from an efficiency standpoint, United States agricultural producers, and especially in corn and soybean country, have reduced dramatically the amount of soil we lose from our fields in production over the last 30 years. The number is incredible. By 30 to 40% in some production areas, we've reduced soil erosion, in some cases 50% in some particular locations where we had particular problems before. We've reduced the amount of water we use to produce a bushel of crop. We've reduced the amount of energy it takes, and therefore the greenhouse gas emitted. So we have a great story to tell because of that efficiency laundry basket. We've done a great job at increasing our efficiency and therefore reducing the stuff that it takes to produce a unit of crop. As a result, we're also reducing those impacts. Greenhouse gases I mentioned, water I mentioned. We're also in soil erosion. We still have places, work to do, no doubt. This is not an absolute perfect story. We have work to do. But we wouldn't even be able to talk about this next tier of environmental improvement had we not made these other improvements. So I think we have to keep in context where we are and where we came from.
Great. I know one of the components too, and Lisa, I think I'll throw this at you. You mentioned just sustainability, what it means to you, and it's having access to food, but it being affordable. Yes. And when you look at the farmer is producing a product, and he certainly would be, have a reasonable price, and he should be able to live and make his living as a farmer. And so he's going to say, well, I need the price maybe to tick up a little bit because things are more expensive. But your position, for it to be sustainable, the cheaper it gets, the easier it is to get out there. So talk to me about that in marriage. How do you justify all this?
Well, and I think that's certainly a conversation that's very relevant to the time, is that we need to update our food policies. We need to look at the production of specialty crops. We need to ensure that our federal food policy matches our nutrition and health policy in this country. And right now there is a move in Congress to break this long-time partnership in the Farm Bill of separating ag and the other environmental titles away from the nutrition title. That is disastrous. It's disastrous for 47 million Americans that rely on the food stamp program, the first line of defense against hunger. Those are supplemental benefits. They are struggling. Again, fresh fruits and vegetables, regardless of whether you have access to them, are much more expensive than processed foods. So we need to, again, to ensure that our specialty crop producers have access to the amount of capital, that they're also safeguarded from what we call Mother Nature disasters, whether it's drought or surpluses in the market. We run an agriculture clearance program at the Association of Public-Private Partnership that has existed for 16 years, and we work with farmers, growers, and commodity producers to pay them pennies on the pound for their surplus or unmarketable agricultural products, fruits, vegetables, and protein items. What we know from the more than 2.3 million Ohioans that we serve, that's the only access they have to healthy, wholesome foods. And they know that they need that in order to live an active, healthy life. That's made possible because of good policy here in the state of Ohio that partners state funding, the General Assembly, with our Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, where we can then help our farmers and growers. And through those years, I can tell you when there's been hail, late frost, not enough rain, and the products that they were growing were not market grade, we were able to move in and clear the market and help to provide them with enough capital that they could go on in future years.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Lisa. And I think to kind of dovetail, I think I think that there is very different agriculture that is represented between, and I think between us, I love what Ben is doing, but Ben and I do very different things, and I'm excited to hear about what he's doing and how he does it. And I think maybe the little bit, and then there is different standards. There's organic. There's all these different types of production, and I think we need all of them to be all hands on deck to feed this our growing population in the world. And so I think all of us working together, and I think sometimes there's a disconnect between. It's like different segments of agriculture market off of each other. It's kind of like, well, those evil big guys, they're doing something evil, and then the other side, or there's the organic side, and well, they're higher cost, and so that's not maybe exactly right for Lisa's clientele, and so. Or her stakeholders, and so. But I think we need to, and what I love about it, we've done these a few times in this discussion about, and other times, is really getting out and saying, hey, we all need to work together and not market off of each other, but let people know there's choices. And that's the fantastic part about our food system is that we can all have choices in the things that in the type of agriculture that we. And one's not necessarily right or wrong, it's just different, and that's the great thing about diversity. So
yeah, and Ben too, it's funny when you talk about the big farms, there's these ideas out there like local farming, smaller, like you have 77 acres, is that sustainable in, a global economy where we're literally talking about feeding the world rather than maybe in your township or your county?
Yeah, and that's a great issue, because as a local farmer who the majority of what we sell straight to the person who uses it, which is very unique in agriculture in Ohio. It's also very unique that my wife and I only farm and are a small farmer. And we've had times where, ironically, sitting next to Pat, there's times that we've been considered big in the local food scene. We are the big farmer because we do it large enough to support our family. And so we need to discuss those issues of hunger in our state and in our country, and how those impact a healthy farm system, and the need for the infrastructure for small farmers to succeed. I can't afford a combine, but I need someone to combine for my things. I need veterinarians, and I need all this stuff. To have a healthy, sustainable farm system, we need a system that benefits all parties involved. And I was speaking with Lisa before that hunger is not just a rural issue, or not just an urban issue or a suburban issue. It's a rural issue. It's a farm issue. Farmers are on food stamps in places.
That seems counterintuitive.
Very.
Absolutely.
But it's unique that farmers, we tell people that visit our farm, when something leaves our farm, it leaves as food, whether it's produce or cheese or lamb. Some people refer to us as food farmers.
Food farmer.
Which should be a foreign concept,
Yeah.
but it's not.
Interesting, and that's, when you talk about all the pieces fitting together, there's, and Julie from Ohio sent us a note and says, it seems that there's a movement to transition back to subsistence agriculture. What is the effect of this on sustainability and a consistent food supply?
Subsistence agriculture in this country could be very dangerous.
It's deadly.
I've seen many in sectors that we work and talk with people. It's kind of like the neo back to the land movement. And I've seen farms that brag to produce all their food, and they have 15, 13 acres, and they produce most of their food themselves. Well, if it takes 13 to 15 acres to feed 2 people, with all our soil in the Gulf of Mexico, we're in the world of hurt.
Yeah. Expand on that.
I had the opportunity to speak at a conference in South Africa in April, and the African continent is absolutely exploding with innovation in agriculture and technology. It's a very vibrant place. It's going to be very exciting to see Africa emerge from its difficulties over the last decades in the next decade or two. One of the issues they struggle with, though, is this sort of myth of subsistence as the appropriate condition of humanity. And it's a myth that is propagated through governments and trans-government organizations, and it is deadly. I'm a grandchild of the Dust Bowl. My grandparents lived through the agroecosystem crash of the 1930s in Oklahoma, and I can tell you that living off of the land means you're hungry or you're dying most of the time. If you're living off of the land, we need prosperity agriculture, not subsistence agriculture. We need prosperity from the land. Now, prosperity from the land is a product of human innovation, as we heard in the last segment, over the last 10,000 years. It is an incredible tribute to the success of human intellect that we have been able to produce and continue even in the last 10 years to increase yields from the land with well-established crops. And we're not done yet, so I think it's very positive.
It's a double-edged sword, though, because when we completely leave subsistence and across-the-board agricultural knowledge, we have some 4-H FFA kids that sometimes help on our farm. And it is amazing in a rural community, kids, it's not a farm community, it's a place that's not the city. And so simple facts that would have been common knowledge 30, 40 years ago, even kids that grow up all around it no longer know.
I couldn't agree with you more. We need, this goes
And
back
so
to,
some of the things like back before my time, the whole idea of fence row to fence row, why are you growing a garden on your farm? Some of those things, they're not just for the prosperity of the farm, they're for creating citizens of the world that know how things happen. And farming is the ultimate interdisciplinary thing.
absolutely agree.
I'm going to jump in and just take a little bit about what you guys were talking about and just go a little bit toward education. And Stephanie, I want to go over to you because as a food blogger, you're kind of like inherently a teacher. I mean, you know, you're putting up recipes. You're like, this is instruction for how to cook. And so when you look at that, is there a responsibility on your part to direct people to recipes that have sustainable foods and support sustainable farms and the things that we're talking about here?
I mean, I definitely, on my blog, focus a lot on, I'm an avid farmers market shopper, so I definitely like to support local businesses, local farms. So I definitely promote that, but it's not the only thing, you know, I promote, but I just kind of create an awareness of how that can help. And just doing things, I mean, as a consumer, I think there's lots of things we can do as far as, you know, using our backyard to grow some things. There's nothing better than going out and getting tomatoes and whipping up some salsa. So kind of, you know, bringing that to the forefront to people about how that can help, because that's less you have to go to the grocery store for, you know, reducing, you know, we waste a lot in this world, a lot of food. So, you know, learning how to maybe compost, you know, kind of bringing that to the forefront.
It kind of goes to that whole cycle of the
Yeah,
farm
just-
and what Pat was talking about
yeah.
earlier. Yeah, I'm curious too, in a broader picture, and anybody can jump in, but when you talk about the education of sustainability, do you think our land-grant universities have a responsibility to do that, and do you think they're doing okay at it?
You bet they do.
Yeah.
And no, from an advocate standpoint who deals with health, food insecurity, food access, land-grant universities have moved so far away from their mission. And we've talked about this. Agriculture should be one of the highest colleges within the Ohio State University, but yet it's the most poorly resourced. You find that through other areas of government. Certainly, while we talk about being an agricultural state, we horribly under-resource the ingenuity, the research, and the development that needs to go on in those universities. But I'm going to take it back down to the basic education level. We have removed nutrition education training from our elementary schools. We reinforce that by having nothing more than heat and serve kitchens in brand new state-of-the-art school buildings. You know, it used to be, you know, your mom told you to eat your vegetables and you knew that the lunch lady was going to reinforce that when you went through the line. That doesn't exist anymore, and it is certainly evident by the amount of diet-related diseases that we're seeing in very young children, the obesity rates, but more importantly, we need to bring that focus back to where our food comes from. It doesn't come out of a frozen food section. It does not come out of a box to be reconstituted. And it's going to take all of us working together. The other thing I want to say is USDA needs to expand their farm-to-school projects. We need to expand our senior and WIC farmers markets. We need to increase the SNAP benefit to ensure that families, low-income families, can be able to afford healthy, wholesome, fresh fruits and vegetables, lean protein items, and we've talked about this. So our land-grant universities need to be on the cutting edge of the food revolution.
Is that to say, though, that there's no room for processed foods?
There's room for processed foods, but I would say that we have moved so drastically away from the balance. It's not there for low-income families who lack access to full-service grocery stores. You know, that's all that are in the small mom-and-pops, bodegas, or C-stores is processed food. And what you'll start to see, we're already seeing this now, as a nation, we spend $167 billion a year on the direct health impacts related to hunger and food insecurity. It is a major driver. And I always say food is medicine. 30% of those that we serve through our food lines report that they or another member are in poor health, and of those, 20% are suffering from diet-related diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, and renal failure, and don't have the resources that they need in order to treat the diet-related diseases.
Certainly, we live in Ohio, so you've got to be processing some food. It doesn't grow in the winter unless you've got some great high tunnel system. But
And no wind.
yeah, that's right.
And no wind.
But you know, one of the unfortunate aspects of the processing industry is that the folks that do the processing have made a fantastic discovery. If you load up foods with fats and with sugars and with salts, you can sell a whole bunch of it, and you can sell it for relatively low nutritional elements for a pretty high price and make a lot of money. And unfortunately, that's the unfortunate trend that we've seen in processed foods.
There's a difference between, Northwest Ohio has a great history of canneries and processed food, and there's some wonderful multi-generational operations in Northwest Ohio. There's a big difference between the Herzl family canning tomatoes and, I'm not going to call out any brand, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. A canned whole tomato with a little bit of salt is a different product than what would be in the bodegas and stuff like that.
I got a follow-up here from Colleen here in the audience. Thanks, Colleen. It says, Ben, you mentioned the issue of lack of young farmers. Does anyone on the panel know of good mentorship programs?
Yes and no. It's not a simple fix. We have lost I'll tell you, I look a lot older than I actually am. It's days in the sun and stuff. I'm 33 years old. I am still a young farmer and will still be a young farmer for a few more years. The problem with many of the young farmer mentoring internship programs, especially in our sector of farming in the direct market, is most of the mentoring is done on farms where they're not paying their bills farming. And so when that has been the modeled farm for you, it gets a lot harder to go to ag credit or do anything that a farmer would do and get financing. Access to financing is very difficult. And I've actually had students come to our farm who have done internships and said, well, what I learned from my internship on, again, not going to say anybody, farm, is that I'll work for 20, 30 years and then I can be a sustainable farmer. And nothing frustrates me more than that. Because if you have to work 30 years in the city to be a sustainable farmer, I mean, frankly, don't even touch that word because you have no clue what it's about.
I gotcha. Another question from the audience here. We've talked a lot about balance, and it seems like it's a pretty healthy group up here. It's like, this is my part and this is their part, and we can all get along together. But what is the mechanism? What do you see as the mechanism to achieve the balance? Is it from a government? Is it just let the market decide? Is it that you guys confab behind the scenes and work out a deal and then we just get what we get? What do you think about that?
It can't be from the government. The government, state and federal government, has been absent from the discussion, as have been the land-grant universities, of sustainable agriculture forever. The reason we're talking about sustainable agriculture, and the reason that is we're seeing, from my perspective, the first time in my career, true innovations in sustainable agriculture is because the market demands it, and because those folks engaged in the market are responding to market forces. And that's a motivation I trust. And it also has adequate feedback mechanisms to ensure that better decisions are made. Not always perfect decisions, but better decisions are made, presuming that we have transparency in the system.
And the continual, like, moving more towards, to meet that demand, more freedom in the marketplace. One of our biggest obstacles to expanding our farm, which one of the aspects of small farms that people never talk about, if you want your next generation involved, it's got to get bigger. Because if dad only could barely make it on 50 cows, milking 50 cows, the son or daughter can't come and only milk 50 cows. It's like the ugly little secret of sustainable agriculture is you do have to get a little bigger to have the next generation. Unless dad wants to go to Florida at like 45 and be done with it.
That means you've only got 12 more years then.
Well, I don't know about Florida. It might be underwater. But things like
I've only got a year left.
but the inequitable application of federal dollars to farmers. I currently cannot rent land near me because my crop insurance. I don't even have crop insurance. I'm old school at 33. I can't get federally subsidized crop insurance. To me, federally subsidized crop insurance is one of the greatest obstacles to young people getting involved in farming. It's impossible to get a foothold.
I think the statement was made that the government and the universities have been absent, and I don't think that's really inaccurate, but I think it is fair to say that there are many government policies that have done more to limit opportunities and options and innovation than they have been to inspire it. Now, that's not certainly true across the board, and certainly the university has in recent years taken on a sustainability focus that had been absent for generations, and it's good that that's returning.
Great. Good stuff. Another question from the audience, and we touched on this maybe a little bit ago, but because so much of what farming is today, and especially even at 77 acres, you have to have some machinery. One of the big sticking points, and when we've talked about it a lot on our radio station, is ethanol. And there's some people that say it's a ridiculously bad idea because it takes food out of the food system and puts it to fuel. But then there's this other idea that if I can, if I'm this much more productive with the ground I have, why not take a portion of that and use it to fuel my future? So what do you think, as far as sustainability goes, which is the better plan?
The commodification of most of the crops that we grow, and certainly those that we subsidize, is a little bit of an issue, because you start looking at corn rather than something that we eat or something that we feed animals with, as something that we sell. And once you start beginning that, then it's easy to convert that to fuel and other issues. And I think it's important to understand that back when the ethanol programs were originally started, corn was selling for $1.80. And people were looking for something else to do with corn. We were in an energy crisis at that time. Our domestic production of oil had been decreasing, so people were looking for options. And it made sense at that time, and to the credit of USDA, they are now looking and trying to branch out and get away from corn and look into more of the renewable crops and the biomass feedstocks other than corn. And I think that's it's always good, an improvement, to not be using those fossil fuels that we dig out of the earth and burn into the atmosphere, and instead use a resource that can be regenerated. I think it's always a positive.
I'll say, and my wife will probably laugh, but when I was 13 years ago, I was a college student. I did not grow up around farming, and I was that neo back to the lander, Reed Wendell Berry, all of that. but there's a reality that comes along with a mortgage. And machines are wonderful things. Whether they are vacuum seeders, we use sophisticated planting equipment just like very large grain people. That is what we need to do to hit the narrow windows in Ohio. And this year, let me tell you, those windows were narrow. But we constantly need to balance that, and we need common sense and energy, and we all need energy, but efficiency is just as important. We've lost that from our energy dialogue, is the efficiency. We're like, we need more and more and more. But, I mean, this is the same with the food system.
Yeah, and Lisa, I want to throw that at you too, because when you talk about, taking a certain percentage of corn off the market, corn is a staple, and we're using it for energy, there's a cost point I'm sure that you're very aware of day to day, and it can float a little bit. If some of the corn goes away for ethanol, might drive the cost up a little bit if it comes back, but then you've got trucks that deliver your food. So now at the gas pump, I'm paying $3.40, $3.50, $3.60. That's got to be a huge issue for you.
We are, and I mean, we're all sensitive to that. While gas prices have come down somewhat, we haven't seen diesel come down at the same rate. And, food doesn't get from farm to store without being picked. We talk about the labor cost and then the transportation cost to get it there, whether it's in the ag side or the emergency food side. We are very sensitive to changes in the market and commodity prices. We're also sensitive to families' incomes. And that's the one thing I want to say about this great recession. While in the U.S. we do have what many described as one of the most abundant, affordable sources of food, it's not so affordable for a growing number of individuals who are playing by the rules and who are stringing together multiple part-time jobs that are providing minimum wage benefits, slightly above minimum wage, no benefits. Those jobs that, we in the Ozzie and Harriet days, those jobs aren't coming back. So it's individuals who are struggling to put gas in their car to get to work, to keep a roof over their head or pay their rent or their mortgage. And it's the food. It's the food budget that is suffering that is the most fungible. So when we look at this, and I just want to say, we subsidize, as a matter of tax policy, building groceries or building retail mall or outlets or moving a company from X to Z. I think we need to look at tax policy and making sure that we're incentivizing the ability to purchase equipment so our farmers and our ag industry can be viable, because it's a win-win. I mean, I say this all the time, you eat or you die. And I'm not sure that people understand that. We truly take for granted where our food comes from until we don't have the resources to be able to feed ourselves. And again, being sensitive that we're also in a global marketplace, it's time for America to wake up and realize that second and third world countries are now becoming first and second world countries, and they like what we have to eat. We are exporting more and more of our food. I'm going to end on this. At the association, we have a policy. We attempt to purchase Ohio-grown and raised foods. Second is domestically produced, and it is getting more difficult to purchase domestically produced foods, especially that are processed, such as canned fruits and vegetables. So look at the origin of your food in the grocery store. You might be surprised at what you read.
It's got to be terribly frustrating that you're a willing consumer and you have money, you're ready to buy, but you can't get it done. I mean, when you look at the global impact of it, and you talked about some of these burgeoning economies, that has gigantic impact on sustainability.
Huge impact. And when we talk about a viable nation, we better make sure that we have very secure and solid ag industries, our food sources, and that's from our truck and fruit and vegetable growers to our animal agriculture as well. I always say to folks, We don't want to wake up one day and realize that we're the Arab Spring. Democracies become destabilized when its population cannot feed itself. And I say that today in America, 47 million Americans are struggling with the resources to be able to feed themselves and their families. That's 1 in 6. What will it take to trip or trigger that?
Well, and it's frustrating too. Go ahead.
Can I add on to that?
Absolutely.
I think she makes some great points, and I think we have to be careful. And in the last segment, they talked about technology and some of those things, and I think there's kind of a little bit of this movement of going kind of back to not applying technology into our food system. And I think that, and that's done through a myriad of ways, and some people want to regulate, additional regulations placed on agriculture and certain practices that maybe they don't believe in or like, and try to guide that. But we have to be very careful, and I'm all for whatever is healthy and whatever is best, and I'm not sitting here saying, well, it's, whatever, full bore ahead, no matter, because we have to be sustainable, and part of that is sustainable, is making sure that it's healthy and all that. But I think we have to be really careful about walking a line of where we make our food system more inefficient at the sake of a romantic view of something that maybe isn't necessarily better in the long term for our whole food system and feeding our people. And I think it's like you point out, it's a national security issue, and people, that doesn't get talked about, but you go to other countries, as Marty, you've been around the world, you know that, and when you're in another country, their number one thing is I want to feed myself. And I think sometimes we're dangerously teetering here right now of where we may start importing sometimes food because of certain regulations or certain things. So we got to be careful with that too.
The conservation implications of those policies can't be overstated as well. The fact is, we're seeing an unprecedented loss in human history of biodiversity on the planet. Yeah. We depend on that biodiversity. It's not just that they're warm and fuzzy and we love them and we like them because we like to see the animals out in the wild. It's because we depend on the ecosystem services those ecosystems provide us. They're central to our ability to prosper in the future, for genetic resources that we're going to need, as well as just simply for nutrient cycling and other carbon cycling, other things. Yet we already utilize 43% of Earth's surface for agricultural production. The only arable land left to expand in are our tropical rainforests. And we're seeing that already. We're seeing a re-acceleration of expansion of agriculture into those areas. So if we're going to feed that additional 3 billion people coming to dinner in the next 40 years, we better do it on the same land we have now, without 1 hectare more land, without 1 joule more of energy, without 1 drop more of water. We better freeze the footprint of agriculture, as Jason Clay of the World Wildlife Fund says, if we're going to have other life on this planet.
Let me hasten to add to that I don't think that there is a necessary choice between advanced technology and efficiency versus inefficiency on the other side, and the return to smaller operations. I think that as Ben has illustrated, it's possible to integrate those efficiencies and modern technologies into a modest scale. And frankly, just a generation ago or so, we had our agriculture organized in a very different way. We had relatively robust and large agricultural communities made up of modest-sized farms. All of them used the same technology and worked together as an industry. It gave a great deal of opportunity. It enhanced biodiversity and maintained that. So that's a system that I think policy has driven us away from a little bit. And we need to tweak some policy changes to reopen the opportunities and recreate those here.
I see one of the greatest shortcomings of alternative agricultural systems, whether that's organic or whatever label you put on it, is that back to the way Grandpa did it. I always get old-time farmers by me, oh, you're farming the way Grandpa did it. Well, in my county, they didn't grow mixed market produce and make sheep's milk cheese. And so we need to develop and use technology smartly, and simple will not be the most efficient or sustainable system. Simple and better are mutually exclusive terms. And unfortunately, in our agricultural system, simple, simple, simple. And we also have to look at, I've done some presentations where they always say, oh, Ben, you're so negative on this. Well, we need to look at the realistic way that technologies are being applied on our farms. Not everyone is a good steward like Pat.
Right.
And we need to learn from that and develop systems where we're closing crop rotations, where we're doing cover crops, where we're getting our soil there, where we're growing grass, which with our water quality issues in Ohio, grass is a sponge. And you know how we keep stuff out of our waterways? We have grass again. And we have recreational, that's the other thing about sustainability. We create sustainable systems, we have recreational opportunities. Do you know how much people spend to go fish for walleye in Lake Erie? We create a system for food and entertainment and a high quality of life with sustainability.
Yeah, when you talk about that, I mean, in my lifetime, my great-granddad was a farmer, my granddad was more of a gentleman farmer, but I can remember going to my granddad's house and on the mantle was his seed corn. I mean, he took the best ears of corn from his field and he shucked it and he put it up there and kept the mice out of it all winter. And then when he planted, the stalks were like this far apart.
Yeah.
You're like, you could just put a lot more corn in there if you do that. So you're right, there's lots of moves, but bring it on home because we talked a couple hours ago about the GMOs. And I got a question here from Julie in Ohio. She says she's still wary of GMOs. Despite the conversation earlier, she's worried about health effects, but people sitting here, are GMO crops and other biotechnology necessary for sustainable food in this country today?
Yes.
Tell me why.
Well, I'll qualify that yes, if the outcomes improve efficiency and decrease impacts. I'm ambivalent about the technology if the outcomes are positive. I love what Ben's doing, and I love what Pat's doing. Every tool in the toolbox is going to be necessary for us to create a sustainable agro-ecosystem that is viable for our children and prosperous for their children. That's going to require every tool in our toolbox. And what we're proposing to do by taking GMOs out is taking a tray of the toolbox out and throwing it on the ground and stomping it. That does not make sense to me. It just is anti-science to me, and I'm not afraid of science. It's not simple, and there are risks, but we should not enter the future in fear. We should have the confidence of our intellect and of our community that we can move forward with a little bit of courage and trust, and we have to earn that trust. That trust is earned through transparency, through diligence and responsibility, but our ag producers are doing that, maybe better than we ever have before.
I would give the other side of that coin. I would say that no, it's not an essential part of sustainability going forward. I think that what we've seen is a plateauing of yields in the recent era of genetically modified crops dominating the marketplace. And that's an indicator that the progress, genetic progress, can be made by conventional plant breeding. We've seen that historically over centuries, millennia, arguably. So I think we can do that without that. I'm not saying that it is a tool that should not be used or cannot be used, but I think a couple of things. As indicated in our earlier panel, I think consumers deserve the right to know what they're buying. And obviously, so that's, if you're going to measure something, consumer acceptance has to be a part of it. I think the long-term studies have to be in place to assure that that long-term health sustainability is not having unintended consequences. But predicated on those things, I'd say it's a tool that can be part of a solution, but certainly not needed in a sustainable future.
I'd like to challenge the yield supposition, though. Evidence is pretty clear, and it's not just because of GM, but it's because of the whole systems of agricultural production with corn and soybeans and cotton. We've increased yield in the last decade during the era of GM production.
Right.
We've increased by 50%.
Trend is flat.
The increasing yield is not a flat line. It's increasing. We're getting more bushels per hectare off the land. And now some of that comes from, ain't nothing free. Some of that comes from putting more stuff in to get more out. There ain't nothing free. But you know, the point is, though, every tool in the toolbox, I think we have a common point there.
I'd also say no. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think we have to look at consumer acceptance. We have to look at other parts of the world that don't want it. And we have to realize that we extol the virtues of a free market in this country. And when we force it on another country, it's not a free market. Labeling should be in place. Country of origin labeling is a great example of something that was fought tooth and nail. It will cost too much. Well, how many people go to the grocery store? How much does it take for the kid to write Peru next to the asparagus? Where did that asparagus used to be grown in Washington State, but that's a different story.
All right, and another piece of it, and again, thanks to the audience, the questions are wonderful. In this country, about 40% of our food is wasted. And you think about sustainability, and well, I grew up in a family that if you didn't clean your plate, you didn't get up. So I guess that's why I sit here and wish I could wear black so I would blend in more. But how do you get to that? I mean, when you talk about sustainability and you hear that kind of number that we waste that much food, it's almost like we don't really care about sustainability. We're just going to just completely waste part of it because we know you guys are so good at producing that even if we just flush 40% of it away, there's going to be more tomorrow.
Well, I'd say, it would be wonderful if everything that we raised or grew met grade A specs, but it doesn't work that way. And again, we are fortunate in Ohio to have a public-private partnership where we can move in and what I say clear markets when they're not grade A or cosmetically challenged fruits or vegetables or gluts in the market. Food waste is a little different. I think sometimes people view food waste as I bought 24 ears of corn and I didn't want to take the time to prepare it and cut it and freeze it, so I'm going to throw it out or it's set in my refrigerator too long. Plate waste is another. Certainly, we do produce a lot, but we've got to be able to make it profitable for the farmer to go in, pick it, pack it, and deliver it to charitable food sources. The other thing we need to get used to is it's not always going to be grade A.
Yeah.
Why is this notion in our mind that if it's not perfectly, perfect without blemish, that we're not going to purchase it? So some of that, again, is growing for a grade A market. The other is in-home food waste. Another is plate waste. And we work with restaurants as well to do prepared and perishable foods rescue programs. But I say this about waste. We need to ensure that low-income people who have to depend on whether it's publicly funded programs such as the SNAP program, the Women, Infants, and Children's program, or those who come, unfortunately, more frequently than ever to a food pantry or soup kitchen, they have the right to be able to consume the same foods that all the rest of us do. And I am a huge supporter of making sure that it's the healthiest, wholesome food possible. If you wouldn't eat it, then don't donate it.
I agree with that.
Stephanie,
I'll just tell maybe a little bit of a positive story. There is a lot of food waste in this country, and there's also, we reclaim some of that in animal foods and feeds. There's a tremendous amount, and it's just like there's certain packaging that isn't sewn just right, there's nothing wrong with the food, and I think that goes to your point. Sometimes but if I'm company X, I got to have it all perfect. And so we do reclaim and work with some companies, and we do feed some of the approved food grade products to our animals in order to reclaim some of that. So.
And I love the CSA model too, because it reconnects people to farmers, and I suspect there's a whole lot less fresh produce wasted from a CSA delivery program than from my Walmart shopping.
Yes and no. And that's one of our great experiences of being a CSA farmer, is every year we have several families, and this gets to the fact that we don't eat as much food, like fresh food. Every year we'll have a few families who will say, you know what we learned? We don't eat that many vegetables. And we won't join again because we didn't eat it.
Wow.
And that's a very telling. We are a culture of convenience and a culture, and I think our food waste and our energy issues go hand in hand. Yeah. We need to, producing food on the farm or in your garden is the same as turning on your car. It is a process of energy moving through a system. And once we can learn about systems and how they work, and whether it's for the future of our food supply, how we can better utilize science. Soil science is amazing right now, and there's lots going on in soil science that has nothing to do with transgenic crops. How we better understand forever, I'm sure there's people in the audience, what is fertilizer? It's NPK. And what do you do if your pH is wrong? You add lime. That was forever. That was the way Grandpa did it. That's not where we're going. And so there are over 20 nutrients in our soil that interact, and they interact at different pHs, and they interact with different microbial activity. And that's, to me, is the real exciting way we're going to feed people, is we understand what we have and work with it.
Stephanie, I'm curious too, when we talk about that waste problem, as a food blogger and as someone who makes recipes, have you noticed at all in what you put out that now you do smaller portions? I mean, are people that consume what you do, are they interested in that? Do they not want to have waste, or it's like, hey, double batch and freeze part? How does that work for you?
Yeah, that doesn't come up a lot. I'll be honest. I think it's a good question, though. I think we, the majority of us, we know we're always going to have food, and I think we really take it for granted. And I'm guilty. I have 2 daughters that went off to college, and I find myself, I still make these huge meals, but I do try to freeze. You know, and I think we eat a lot, and our portion sizes are much larger than other countries. So I think it's, you know, really just having an awareness of what we're using, you know, using practices like canning, you know, to kind of preserve the harvest so that you're not throwing out all these, you know, tomatoes and things like that. So I think it takes, you know, every single person doing little things that will add up, you know, to a nice reduction.
I did get a note, what is a CSA, please?
The CSA is a Community Supported Agriculture Program. They've been around for pushing 25 years in the United States. They fall under a lot of different guises. The way ours works, people, consumers, mainly in the Columbus area, buy a share of our produce harvest, our vegetable harvest at the beginning of the season, and then every week, whatever we can pick that week on the farm, they get a portion of it. The biggest thing, I think, the enormous capacity of a CSA program, like this season or last season, is to translate what weather does to farming. And that's one of the other, because stuff magically appears in a grocery store. It doesn't magically appear in your combine or in your picking bucket. And so that is the one, as our population gets further and further away from the farm, one of the vital parts of a CSA program is reconnecting. But sometimes it's startling at how unconnected.
Well, people apparently in the audience at least are connected. I've got a question here from the audience. It says, I'm beginning to see sustainably raised on menu items in certain restaurants. What does that mean when I see it? Is this a term that has an official list of requirements like certified organic does?
No.
Getting a no, okay.
No, there is no official Federal Trade Communication standard for sustainability. It's like natural. It's an undefined term in commerce. So I don't trust it. I don't trust it at all. We're working very aggressively to define the metrics for what sustainability ought to be based upon farmer definition and food supply chain provider definition of what sustainability should be. And it's all connected to customer expectations too. Science-driven, outcomes-based, transparent, technology neutral. Those are our 4 criteria. We don't dictate how you get it, how you meet the outcomes. Just reduce your soil loss, reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, increase your efficiency of nutrient utilization. Those are the sorts of outcomes that we all agree on that you mentioned earlier. So put the power in the hands of the people who control the earth, the people who start up a tractor or in some parts of the world hitch up an oxen, and they're the ones who shape the planet. Put the power of knowledge in their hands and choice in their hands, and trust that they'll make better choices with better knowledge.
One of the aspects dealing with restaurants, we sell a lot to restaurants as well as farmers markets. As local food, sustainable food labeling becomes more popular, we always have to keep farmer focused.
Yeah.
As it's become more popular, as it's in magazines and all sorts of popular media outlets, we can't forget about the farmers. And so one of the things that hurts us most is when we see, and there's lots more locally sourced food manufacturers, entrepreneurs. I want to know if they're getting a premium for their product, whatever they're manufacturing, and some of them are getting very large premiums. I want to make sure the person who has manure on his boots and is up in the morning to milk his cows is getting a premium too.
Amen.
And that we will lose local food if we don't keep focused on that.
Well, I use an old radio adage. I see by the old clock on the wall that our hour's about up. But I would like to end with this, and at this time I'm going to start over here and swing this way. And it's a nice way to finish. Another question from the audience. When you look forward and you talk about sustainability, in agriculture today there's a divide between conventional and organic production. Which is truly sustaining and feeding the population in 2050? If you want to address that specifically, but just in general, I mean, we have a Columbus 2020 and they're looking at, 7 years from now. If you can play it out that far, what do you see in the next decade or 2 or 3? Stephanie, we'll start with you.
That's a great question. I think we're going to need both. I don't know if organic is going to feed, all the people that we need, but I do think it should be a choice for people that want that choice. But I do, agree that there's definitely a need for the conventional, farming for, the future of our food system.
A sustainable, supportable, affordable, and viable. We need to first make sure that our food system is strong, and that our farmers, our growers, and commodity producers are able to produce. They're accountable, some of the most accountable people I've ever met. So we need to leave it to the experts.
Okay. If it's profitable and equitable to the farmer, if it builds community cohesion and prosperity, and if the impacts on the environment do not compromise future generations' ability to meet their needs, then it's sustainable. I can't tell you what practices will accomplish those goals. I can tell you that it's going to take every tool in our toolbox to do it.
I would say that to the extent that we commodify agricultural production, it's a move away from sustainability. It tends to export food out of the local food sheds and import foods from far afield into the local food sheds. That is not a sustainable practice in itself. I think there are some natural phenomena that need to be incorporated into agricultural systems. The interaction of crop farming and livestock farming, those blend together, merge together, and create mutual efficiencies. So to the extent we can reintegrate those, that's going to be great moving forward. I wouldn't say it's mutually exclusive of either the industrial or the organic system, but we need to incorporate those principles.
NRCS, the National Resource Conservation Service, defines sustainable as the capacity to function. And so I think going forward, I would say, does the current paradigm of conventional in 2050? No. Does the current organic paradigm? No. It's biologic, whereas, as Joe said, we reintegrate, develop systems that honor the biology that provides food for everybody. And a dynamic system that creates an actual system and doesn't have these commodified issues around the world where we're no longer will I be the farm that grows food. We need all our farms to grow food again in a high science way.
I think I agree with the science part about it. I really think that we've got, in order, and whatever we look like in 2050 will require us to be science-based in order to effectively feed this world, this growing population. And I think we have to, as our universities and our governmental agencies, we need to continue to go back and help research the research side. I think it was talked about a little bit, but I think we're very scary right now, the lack of research that's being done and supported. I'm saying supported from our traditional avenues of research. And I really think from 2050 we have to begin to look at that again and get the political will for that to happen. So,
after sitting through the first one and now this one, the one issue with science that I just have to say, we cannot have this blind faith in the absolute objectivity of science. It is all humans interpreting. We said earlier about the hog research in GMOs. There are many more factors in that. We can't simplify it to this point. Agriculture is the ultimate interdisciplinary thing of unimaginable variables. And so it's science, it's objective. Take it for that. We got to get past that, because that's not going to lead us in a good direction.
Well, with the murmuring I hear, I think there's a lot of people with you on that. And if you're murmuring out there too, yes, we're murmuring with you, so thank you. Hey, it's been a lot of fun and great information. I just want to thank everybody who was on the panel, and thank you for being here today. Our sustainability and your food panel, it's a special thanks right now to our panelists, Pat Hord and Ben Sippel, Joe Logan, Dr. Marty Matlock, Marty, Lisa Hamler-Fugitt, and Stephanie Eakins. Special thanks too to the Ohio Soybean Council, the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation, and U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance for putting together today, hosting today's Food Dialogues event. If you'd like more information and to continue today's discussion about science, technology, and food, make sure you visit fooddialogues.com. You know to put the 3 W's on the front, right? This concludes the Food Dialogues Ohio event. Thank you to everybody who is involved, for those of you who are here in person, for those of you who are joining on the internet, and for the many, many people behind the scenes who helped put this on. Mike on the mics, you did a heck of a job. All you Twitter and bloggers over there, God bless you. Thanks. Eat safe, drive safe. Appreciate it.